Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with jazz pianist and educator Charles Chen. We talk about his brand new 2024 CD called Charles Play, along with living through the pandemic and his life in music so far. He is from Cupertino, California, and over the years he has performed or recorded with Billy Drummond, Bob Sheppard, Roy McCurdy, Ralph Moore, Peter Washington, and Kenny Washington. We get into his journey now and how it's going to go into the future. Dig this interview.
Charles, great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out to the show. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So I've really enjoyed the album Play. Before we get into this new album, I want to know, we're looking at the 4-year anniversary of this pandemic, and I'm curious, how did you make it through that time period, and how did it change your approach as a musician?
So, obviously during this time, there were no gigs. So we had to find different ways of dealing with, income streams and so on. So I started teaching online. I also decided to kind of reskill, look at a lot of my, the holes in my playing and try to fix them while I had the extra time to practice. So in particular, I worked a lot on playing solo piano, which is not something I normally do. Playing things like ballads, working on harmony. I even because of the online thing, it was actually easier because I could get lessons from other people that I've always wanted to get lessons from, like people in New York, like Michael Weiss and David Hazeltine, Jeff Patton. So I basically treated that as a period of growth. I actually really didn't like teaching before the pandemic, but now I love teaching. So I'm really happy I did that.
So talk to me a little bit about this album. Was it kind of informed by living through the pandemic and just kind of in general, how did this release feel?
Yeah. So, I didn't plan on doing an album until much later, until I was more established. But during the pandemic, I was people, well, first of all, people have been kind of nagging me to do an album for a while. But also I kind of realized that, I only have one life and I better get this started before, maybe I'll die from COVID, who knows, right? So yeah, there was all kinds of existential crises going on, and I decided to really focus on writing during the pandemic, and some of the writing made it through into the album too.
So talk to me a little bit about how you artistically put this together. I mean, this is a big shout out into the jazz world, a big way of you kind of coming out to everybody with your music and your vibes. So what was kind of your idea of putting this together and what you really wanted people to hear?
I mean, if anything, it's I remember Miles Davis said something about how being a musician is like being a chef, because you just eat people's foods and then you decide what you like about foods, and then you kind of make your own food, basically make the dish that you would want to eat the most. And so this is kind of my dish that I would like to eat the most, right? This is all my favorite kinds of music, with some of my favorite musicians ever: Ralph Moore, Kenny Washington, Peter Washington. And it's kind of a throwback to jazz from the 50s and before, very Cedar Walton based arrangements, a lot of hard bop, a lot of more non-modern kind of jazz as opposed to a lot of jazz that's coming out now. And that's the kind of music that I really enjoyed. So I just want to show people basically what I like, and I hope that they like it too.
So what are you ultimately hoping the listener gets from this album?
I mean, what I really hope is it's kind of like a gateway drug. They're like, ooh, I like this, I want to listen to more. And then they realize that, they can listen to Cedar Walton Trio, Mulgrew Miller, and any of the great classic traditional players. And that's all I want. I just want people to listen to it, realize I want to listen to more of this, and try to listen to more of jazz of that vein.
So talk to me a little bit about how this journey into the jazz, and more specifically music, how did this all begin for you?
I started playing piano when I was 6. I think I saw one of my friends play piano, and then I told my mom, hey, I want to learn how to play that. And, we came from a poor background, so we didn't have very much money. So we borrowed an electric keyboard from somebody, and I just learned how to play on my own for a long time, until I told one of my other friends who had a piano teacher as a mom that I wanted to get lessons from her, like kind of without my mom's permission because she didn't have the money. And then I told basically the piano teacher that we were really poor, and then so she gave us like a really good deal on the rates. So it was like $20. So I started learning how to play classical piano, and that's where I started for a long time. I didn't get into jazz until high school. I took a jazz class, and in my high school where we did combos and we read lead sheets and played gigs and stuff. But I really didn't understand jazz or get formal jazz training until I went to Stanford Jazz Workshop about, I think, the summer after I did class. And there, that was great. Like, so my first jazz piano teacher ever was Taylor Ikesty. Shout out to Taylor. He's excellent. And he taught me a lot, chords, how to play lines, how to really comp and so on. And from there, I got better and better at jazz in college, where I took lessons with Peter Horvath, who's another local pianist. And then from then on out, I just started playing gigs locally for a long time, up until the pandemic. And then it was time for me to branch out after the pandemic, and that's why I started hiring all those New York cats in my album.
So what was the first live jazz show that you saw that really blew you away?
Yeah, so speaking of Stanford Jazz Workshop, that thing had like a week-long festival that came with the workshop. So every night, like, we all got tickets to go see the festival. And so some of the most stacked lineups were there. So Cedar was there, Eric Alexander was there, the Heath Brothers, Goldstein, Stewart, Bernstein, Chris Potter. But out of those shows, my favorite one was the one with Taylor Ikesty and Julian Lage and this guy who was on sax. It was Yasmani Terry and Dana Stevens on sax and Ambrose on trumpet. And it was crazy. It was super devilish, very high octane. Like every song I was just like, I wanted to stand up and clap. I really loved that. And that's kind of the kind of enthusiasm and energy that I want to provide when I, play music.
So the one thing is that you've recorded or performed with, you got Billy Drummond, you got Bob Sheppard, Ralph Moore, Peter and Kenny Washington. There's all these people, and you're an educator now. So what have you gleaned from all these legends and luminaries that you in turn are trying to teach those that you are instructing music to?
Right. The biggest thing actually is I mean, it's kind of circular, but it's the willingness to pass it on to the next generation. Because these guys are just so generous with what they were talking about. I would ask Billy, hey, why'd you play things this way? And he gives me some good answers. I asked Ralph, why do you articulate things this way? And everybody was like, there's no secrets being held. And from that, I realized that, there really aren't any secrets. Everything is just, the music is bigger than one person. And it's kind of like this like flow of history. Like, Ralph Moore learned from Joe Henderson and Junior Cook and all these other people. And it's kind of just like, we're just passing it down like we would pass down folk tales, like from ancestor to ancestor. I guess that's not really answering the question. That's just like a why, but not a how. So in terms of how, I think the biggest thing, obviously, is to just play with, the best people you can play with, but also to really listen deeply to records. When we were at Ralph's hotel room, all we did was just listen to records. And Ralph would be like, I like this, I like that. And then I'll be like, ooh, I didn't even know that existed. And so I think just doing that with my students has helped them a lot too.
So at the end of the day, there's all these components that go into being a musician, from playing live to recording, promoting, teaching. But what do you like the best about being a professional musician?
I thought I would hate recording, but I actually really enjoy the process. The whole thing, from the beginning, composing, to being in the studio, to, kind of being a quarterback and deciding what happens when. And even in the post-production stage, the mixing and mastering stage, the production of the art assets, writing the liner notes, all that stuff seemed really fun to me. So that's one aspect, recording. the other aspect I actually really like about music is being a historian. So there's this great website called Lord Disco. It's Thomas Lord's discography, where you can go in. There's a database of like almost every jazz record ever recorded, and it's all like linked so they can see like which musicians played in which date, and you can click on the musician and see like their whole history. Kind of going through there and just going back and like really deeply listening to a lot of stuff I, thought I had no interest in, but now I do. Like people like Teddy Wilson, like kind of like the old school like stride kind of swing kind of era stuff. That's been really fun too. Sorry, I'll give you one more answer. The other thing I really like doing about being a professional musician is talking to other professional musicians. I'll go and talk to Kenny Washington about Big Sid, Catlet, and he'll just go on and on and on and on about it. And I love hearing that kind of stuff. All the stories that he knows about, him playing with Hank Jones or Tommy Flanagan, just really great stuff that you couldn't really get from a book because it's all in people's brains.
So the one thing about jazz is there's this romantic lore that goes into it. There's stages that you want to play on, places you want to go. What was the first stage that you got on that you really wanted to play on and you're like, wow, this is wonderful, I've arrived? And I should say, what is the stage down the line that you would love to play on that you've always dreamed of being on?
The biggest name stage I played on was Yoshi's in Oakland. It's, the biggest jazz club in the Bay Area where I'm from. And what was that for? That was for a competition. I won the Jazz Search West competition in 2019, like I guess right before COVID. And I got to play there, and that was a really fun experience. I don't know if I've made it yet because I haven't been a real leader on the thing yet there, but hopefully one day. Where I would like to play is hard to say. The Village Vanguard. I would love to play there. There's a lot of my favorite recordings that come from there, and it's just a cool vibe. I've been there so many times. I saw some great musicians there. Yeah, really cool place.
So, at the end of the day, why do you love jazz?
Well, there's a lot of reasons why I love it. I think it's the heart of American music. Almost all kinds of music that's come from America. Rock and roll, blues, whatever, they're all connected to jazz in some way or other, either predecessors or post-cessors. It's just so beautiful. It's one of the few art forms where you can improvise within limits and still have it sound pretty good. And also it's so prevalent in all around the world that you can just walk up to a jam session and play any song and everybody knows the songs. And so I think it's beautiful that you can share this kind of common experience with people you've never met before, and it'll still sound pretty good.
So let me ask you this. If you could get into a time machine and go back in time and see a dream show in the annals of jazz, where are you going? What would you love to see?
Do I have to pick one?
You could have a couple. We can add to it.
Okay, so speaking of Village Vanguard, I would love to see Bill Evans, the trio, with Scott LaFaro, Paul Motion, live at the Village Vanguard, the one with Waltz for Debbie and Sunday at the Village Vanguard. That would be amazing. Just like the kind of the pure classy touch that he has on the piano, along with seeing Scott LaFaro doing crazy acrobatics. That would be awesome. So that's one. I'd love to see the Train Quartet. I'd love to see McCoy kind of just like bash out like these like incredible powerful chords on the piano while Train is wailing on the soprano. Any of those like mid 60s shows. Maybe with Eric Dolphy, right? He was doing some of that stuff in the Vanguard, I think, or the Village Gate. And I'll give you one more. I would love to see one of those Jazz at the Philharmonic things. Like when Norman Granz was putting on those jam sessions with people like Oscar Peterson and Lester Young. And they were and Bird was on those too. I would love to see that. That would be awesome.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this. Everyone out there has a perception of you. Family, friends, fans, but you ultimately run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
It's interesting. I'm like, I think I'm a pretty silly person. I constantly crack jokes in my social groups. I'm always trying to change the subject. But when it comes to like the music side of things, I'm like pretty serious. I'm like, very respectful of history, kind of try to make sure I cross all my T's and dot my I's in any of the music stuff that I do. So some of my like humor does shine through. I think my producer rolled his eyes when he heard me quote like "Turkey in the Straw" or something like "Simple as Pleasures" in my album. So yeah, I think it's a combination, and I think I mentioned this in the liner notes where I treat play very seriously, and I think that's what I hope people get out of me.
So what is going on as far as shows coming up? Anything as kind of the future unfolds? What are you kind of amping up for now?
Yeah, so I'm working on my next album. It's going to be recorded in July, and that's going to be with Randy Brecker, Bob Malik, Mike Richmond, and Adam Nussbaum. And we're going to be doing all kinds of stuff. Some stuff from the past, like some stuff that's kind of, inspired by Horace Silver. And then some stuff from the future. Not future, modern stuff. So think like more Brecker Brothers kind of stuff. And I'm also going to be, maybe even playing on a pop song. We'll see on that record.
Right on. So much for taking a minute up. Thank you for opening up. I've really enjoyed this album. I've already played it on the show. So I'm looking forward to the next album and everything that comes out. It's wonderful stuff, man.
All right. Sounds great, Joe.
Thanks for listening and tuning into another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players and minds in Cupertino, New York City, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. Thanks to Charles for his time, story, and energy. If you want to hear more Neon Jazz interviews, you can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to us at YouTube, and for everything Neon Jazz, go to theneonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.